Chapter 13: The Art of Implementation. Implementation is one of the most misunderstood elements of the art of productivity. Many people who are not achieving their personal definition of success believe that implementation means starting. As you and I have discovered, implementation is part of a seamless process that begins with defining your own success, establishing a mission, evaluating your passion, creating motivation, and communicating all of these elements in a way that will make success inevitable. Many people feel when they watch the 100-meter dash in the Olympics that implementation means settling into the starting blocks and waiting for the starter's gun to sound. In reality, that 100-meter dash began for those Olympians years before with dreams, planning, training, qualifying, and finally the opportunity to have the entire process culminate in one 10-second dash. Proper implementation does not come naturally to human beings. There are those among us who want to engage their fight or flight instinct and begin a lifelong quest as a knee-jerk reaction to some random stimulus. On the other hand, there are those poor souls who have fallen victim to the analysis paralysis, and they are not going to leave their house until all the lights are green. General George Patton is among my favorite historical figures because he certainly knew how to plan, prepare, handle logistics, and analyze all factors, but he also knew how to light the fuss and implement. General Patton said, "A good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week." There is a great newspaperman in my hometown who called me a number of years ago after reading my books. He complimented me on my writing and asked if I had ever written a column. I told him I had not even considered it, and he asked me to fax him 400 to 500 words. About 10 to 15 minutes later, I sent the fax and never thought any more about it. He ran the column the following week and called me and said the words that turned me into a newspaper, magazine, an online columnist around the world. Just do that every week. In the beginning, I would worry and fret about each week's column until he gave me another piece of great advice. This is a newspaper. We don't need it to perfect. We need it Thursday. That was almost 1,000 columns ago, and writing my weekly Winner's Wisdom column has become an automatic routine part of my life. There are millions of people around the world who have read my columns, and the first edition of them has been released as a book entitled Wisdom for Winners, and there is a follow-up book, Wisdom for Winners 2, with more in the works. This all became possible when I understood the proper implementation principles relating to my definition of success as a weekly columnist. Perfection is something we should strive for, and it should motivate us to move ahead. Unfortunately, for too many people, perfection becomes an unachievable ideal that creates an environment where they simply never begin. As you and I discovered earlier, every time you take an airplane flight, you are off course. The vast majority of the time, the pilots would tell you that the conditions are never totally perfect. The reason we have an airline industry and the ability to travel anywhere in the world in hours instead of months is because pioneers dreamed of a system and created an industry that recognizes that within the bounds of safety, there are any number of conditions that will allow for a perfectly routine flight and will all, of course, from time to time. The key to implementation is to take off and adjust. Those who overcome the temptation to fall victim to analysis paralysis can often fall into the ready, fire, aim trap. This life you and I are living right now is not a practice game. It is our own Super Bowl, World Series, and Olympics all rolled up into one powerful, passionate process. While we don't want to sit around contemplating the conditions and analyzing all elements until we lose the window of opportunity, we also don't want to minimize our potential by not going through the valid steps of the art of productivity. Anything worth the investment of our time, effort, and energy is worth planning and utilizing motivation and communication principles as we prepare to implement. If you went to a local grocery store and noticed people at the checkout counter, you will discover that the majority of people who have more than one or two items came to the grocery store with a shopping list. They don't want to waste the time, effort, and energy it took to do their grocery shopping by forgetting something they really need and then being forced to return to the store. I remember as a child working on some carpentry project with my grandfather. He explained to me the wisdom of measuring twice and cutting once. His words have stayed with me for several decades. If you don't have the time to do it right, when you are going to have the time to do it over? The old adage said that you must plan your work and work your plan is really true. We all have limited time, energy, creativity, and resources. If you're going to reach your own destiny through your personal definition of success, you've got to utilize everything you've been given by implementing the art of productivity. Rarely will you achieve more than you have planned, and you will never achieve all you can unless you have created your art of productivity blueprint. There are many ways to implement that take into account your and your team's individual characteristics, but all implementation styles have certain success principles in place that relate to the art of productivity. As I am dictating these words to you, I am seated in an office within the Narrative Television Network, which is the company I founded and run. Several times during the process of dictating this chapter, I will be interrupted by a phone call or a person here in the office with a quick question. This doesn't bother me as I have never been a temperamental writer. I know authors who literally have to move into a mountain cabin and be surrounded with total silence before they can write. There are great writers who get up early in the morning and write a few pages each day. There are other writers who start sometime after the world has gone to bed and write late into the night or until dawn. There are writers who type into a computer, others still use a manual typewriter, and I even know extremely successful authors who write longhand on a yellow pad. All these styles can succeed and do succeed for writers who establish their own personal definition of success, create their own writing mission, pursue the works they publish with a passion, create their own motivation. Communication is to everyone around them, and within a system that works for them, they implement. If you desire to be a published author but only want to work at your craft for a half an hour every New Year's Eve, I submit to you this would not work. If you're not willing to learn the most rudimentary elements of spelling, grammar, and punctuation, you don't have a chance. And finally, if you don't learn the basics of the publishing industry and work within those broad expectations that have been established, you're probably never going to be the guest of honor at your own book signing. On the other hand, in most endeavors, there are few rules that will confine you and many ways to implement your mission that will result in your reaching your personal definition of success. When I started a narrative television network which makes movies, television, and educational programs accessible for 30 million blind and visually impaired Americans and millions around the world, I realized that nothing exactly like NTN had ever been done before. Even though I knew we were going to be breaking some new ground, I also realized that there are certain basic rules and expectations within the broadcast and cable industry that needed to be guide our implementation. The industry utilizes certain electronic signals, bandwidth, tape formats, and other technical specifications that must be adhered to. Television programs have to fall within standard 1 hour or half-hour slots, and commercials need to conform to the style, timing, and expectations of the advertising industry. However, once you cover the basics, you still have some freedom to implement outside of the box. After we pulled together a little bit of programming and a few broadcast and cable affiliates across the country, I realized if we were ever going to make any money, we were going to have to sell something advertising the full up our commercial slots. We located a book that had a list of the top 100 advertisers in America. I felt these would be more good prospects because I have a theory on selling. If you're going to sell to people who buy. A lot of entrepreneurs and salespeople waste precious time and potential by repeatedly beating a dead horse. So, armed with my list of 100 prospects, I began calling them all each day. I have had people sit in my audience at conventions and arena events who later have challenged me by emphatically stating, you can't call 100 people every day. Well, I actually enjoy bursting their bubble when I tell them, yes, you can. It takes about 6.5 hours. I know this because I did it for many months. The reality is that when you cold call the head of advertising of some of the largest corporations in the world, they won't all talk to you the first day or the first week or even the first month. You've got to be willing to break them in, or in my case, maybe wear them down. So day after day I would call each of the 100 prospects I had established, placing a check mark by their name after the call. I remember well the day that one flustered advertising executive got on the phone with me and said, "Mr. Stovall, I don't know who you are, but do you realize that you have phoned my office 57 days in a row?" I chuckled and replied, "Yes, sir. I'm well aware of that because your name is right here in my notebook that lists my 100 prospects that I call each day. And if you don't hear my story today, I'll be calling you tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Please understand, I'm not an annoying, pushy salesperson. I am simply someone who established a personal goal, forged a mission, and generated passion and motivation that I communicated to my team and prospects as I implemented through my sales calls." Now you're probably thinking I wouldn't have done it that way. I wouldn't disagree with you, and if I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't do it that way again either. However, implementing in that fashion generated enough success for the narrative television network to become a variable and growing television network. While you and I might not do it that way again, the fact of the matter is that we implement it in another way, we still would have to get our story and opportunity in front of the right people who would help us succeed through the art of productivity. While you and I might not do it that way again, the fact of the matter is that we implement it in another way. We still would have to get our story and opportunity in front of the right people who would help us succeed through the art of productivity. We should never be